Hello everyone, my name is Gustavo Lillis and today we're going to answer the question, why does Donald Trump care so much about Somalia? So let's begin with. The United States is the biggest superpower in the world, while Somalia is the biggest candidate to be the worst country in the world. And why do they become ops? There are some reasons. Donald Trump said that Somalis destroyed the US and he even called Somalis as garbage. That's something. Yeah, as a global superpower who since 2008 is in the cycle of deaths and economic problems and who put banks above its people. Of course, the problem is with the small community in Minnesota for Somalis, of course. You could think that Donald Trump has problems, personal problems with Somalis, and he could be the craziest man in the world, but he wouldn't say such a thing, especially live, because it's the way he thinks. So the problem is deeper than you may think. Let's find out. So the story between Somalia and the US is not something recent, and we need to come back to the history of Somalia. So you can see in the map that Somalia it's really divided between tribes or clans, and this of course not just Somalia but Ethiopia, Kenya, and Djibouti, and all these countries of the African Horn. It's really hard to unite all those people because they are really divided, especially with clans. They were just united because they were the same sultanate. They were part of the same sultanate, so all of those clans were majority Islamic, and that's it. The rest they were completely different sometimes. So the region that we call Somalia today was colonized by two countries, British Somaliland and Italia's Somaliland. Actually, the United Kingdom in the north and Italy in the majority parts of the country. And the same story of all African colonies, like colonial rule, inequality, exploitation, and when it happened the First and Second World War, British and Italian colonial rule became unfeasible to maintain. So with popular revolts and all this stuff, especially with the British government, finally the people of Somalia in both sides became independent in 1960. The experience was in Ethiopia and North Kenya to integrate all the Somalis spread in Africa, but it was a failure. And the US helps Kenya and Ethiopia, so this is the first movement. The US is part of the Somali history, and Somalia was now in that recent independence. So Somalia was fucked up. In the end of the 60s decade, military coup was imposed in Somalia, and the new country was now experiencing a socialist movement, socialist movement imposed by this dictator called Siad Barre. They tried to implement socialism based on Maoism because Somalia was a rural and agricultural country. But all of a sudden, Barre changed sides when he tried to conquer the Ogaden in Ethiopia, because Ogaden is the majority part of those Somali tribes. The USSR turned back Somalia because they were invading another socialist country that was Ethiopia at the time. Somalia lost this war, and after that they became even a US ally because USSR turned back on them. But this loss and other key factors, for example the brutalization of clans that weren't aligned with Bahe and other economic problems, were factors to the insurgence of national movements against the dictatorship. This guy appearing on your screen is Mohammed Fahid, and he's the guy that led with his clan the movement in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia, to take Bahe's dictatorship. And even though he led this revolution, really important revolution, he's one of the worst human beings you could possibly think. But after decades in power, what could possibly happen with a country that is unstable like Somalia, now losing the power of like decades, and without a strong power and a strong unity? I think you know my answer. The civil war in Somalia is one of the worst conflicts in recent history, and guess what? It is still happening today. And one of the main groups who try to conquer Somalia, actually the main groups who try to conquer Somalia, are the Islamic insurgents like Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and ISIL, the old ISIS. And if one of those names are involved, America's involved too. Bush administration intervened in the infinite Somali civil war in 2007 to promote his war on terror, and since then they never stopped to attack the country. All the presidents at least had some civilians in the groups of killed people. But if you look, Trump administration wasn't absurd, and there are some reasons for that. Trump has this fallacy that he's a peace-building president, but he just tries to use this agenda in wars that have big coverage by the media. But like wars like Yemen or in Somalia are wars that he abuses like military power, and he shows off the power of the US military. Other reason for that is that it's really important for this, like his supporter or Trumpkins, that he passes this image that US is a powerful and sovereign country when it comes to military. So he uses the country, and he uses still the coverage of war and terror to promote the US military imposition in Somalia. But the last reason is not really well known, but it's probably the most important now: Somaliland. The old colonized part of British Somalia is since the Baha'is government trying to become an independent country, but is not recognized by any UN member. But they have a really tempting proposal to the American government. So this here is Somalia, and this north part here is the Somaliland. And here is the Gulf of Aden, and the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and this is a really important place, because if it wasn't for this passage here through the Red Sea, Suez, and Gulf of Aden, ships from all around the world, especially here in the Western world to the Eastern world, would either need to do a whole turnaround on Africa, and this is expensive, or would go to the north of the globe here, which is really cold and expensive as well to go to the other side. And of course, the US has military bases here, and one of them is Camp Lemonia in Djibouti. Djibouti is actually the country with most military bases here in the African Horn, but that's the reason why this became such a problem for the US. Guess who has a military base in Djibouti? And guess who is patronizing infrastructure in Djibouti as well? The relations between China and Djibouti are getting stronger, and that's a problem for the US, because the US won't patronize shit for underdeveloped countries and developing countries. But the solution is in the side of Djibouti. Somaliland is kind of a stable country with a stable democracy compared to the hell that Somali politics are. And what Somaliland proposed to the US? Minerals and a military base just for an American recognition, and that's a lot. American Congress is really looking forward to the idea to the recognition of Somaliland. Scott Perry, congressman, already created this act of independence of the African country. And it's really important for Trump to create instability in Somalia. It doesn't matter if he needs to call people garbage. It's part of the big conservative plan to create problems in Somalia and to legitimize Somaliland. Thank you for watching this video. This is the first video of this project that will be about geopolitics and history in an easy and relaxed way. Share this video and this channel to your friends, and that's it. Thank you again.